Hello and welcome to your Lettings Finance training. In this video, we're going to be covering rent guarantee. Within the rent guarantee section, we'll be looking at the configuration setup of your rent guarantee tenancies, setting up a rent guarantee tenancy, and also setting up property guaranteed rent for the scenario where you might have an agreement with your landlord that you will be paying them rent even if the property is vacant. So the guaranteed rent function within Expert Agent allows you as the agent to put up the rent for the property even if the rent hasn't come in from the tenant. So it's an agreement between you and the landlord that you will be paying them regardless of whether the rent has come in from the tenant or not. So if you have such a management type within your agency, this rent guarantee function will be useful to you. If you offer your landlords rent guarantee, but that is an insurance-based rent guarantee managed by the referencing company or someone like that, that won't fall under this rent guarantee section, purely for if you as the agent are guaranteeing the rent. So if we jump over into Expert Agent to start with, we'll have a look at that configuration. So via your top tools menu, we'll go into configuration, and we'll go into setup prompts on the right hand side, and we'll look at management types, the bottom one in that section. What you'll need to do before you do anything is ensure that you've got a guaranteed rent management type set up. If you don't have one, you're going to click New Management Type, pop in the name there. Under the Management Type drop down, you're going to select Guaranteed Rent, and you're going to untick Pass Rent to Landlord, and you're going to save there. And that will add your guaranteed rent type into your list of management types. The next thing you're going to do is you're going to look at lettings configuration at the bottom, and you're going to go to financial defaults. You're going to tick to allow property guaranteed rent so that those raise automatically for you. You've also got the option to set a number of days delay. So if your tenant pays their rent or is due to pay their rent on the 1st of the month, if you set your guaranteed rent up as a 0 days delay, the rent will appear to pay to the landlord on that 1st of the month. However, if you want to allow yourself a few days grace to see if the tenant does pay, albeit a few days late, you can pop a number of days delay in there. So for example, I could pop 5 days delay in there. So the money wouldn't show to pay to the landlord until 5 days later. So that's up to you whether you set that to have a number of days delay or not, depending on the agreements you have with your landlord. Once you've set that up, you're going to save, and you're now configured to start using guaranteed rent. So we'll now have a look at setting up a guaranteed rent tenancy and how that differs to a normal tenancy. So if we close the configuration section down, what we're going to do is we're going to search for our property, and we're going to click on it to open it. And just as we would normally, we're going to go to tenancies and add a new tenancy and fill in the details. Under management type, we're selecting our guaranteed rent management type. We've still got the option to take a management fee. So if we do take a management fee on our guaranteed rent, if there's still a management fee we charge, we can pop that in there. If we don't, we can leave that as 0. We can select our agreement type. Again, that might be your standard AST, but you may have a separate agreement type set up within the system for your guaranteed rent tenancies. And select your negotiator and save. We're going to add our tenants in. Once we add our tenants in, you'll see we get this additional section at the bottom here that we didn't have before with our standard fully managed or let-only tenancies, which is the guaranteed rent details. So the bit at the top is the rent and the deposit that the tenant will be paying. So the tenant is due to pay £12.50 on a monthly basis. The guaranteed rent details will be the amount that goes to the landlord. So it may be that you have an agreement with your landlord that you don't charge a management fee, but they will be getting less rent than the £12.50. So say, for example, they might be getting £1,100 there. It may be that your agreement is that you do take a management fee and the landlord gets the full £12.50. It will very much depend how you set this up as to the agreement that you have with the landlord, the agreement that you have in place. but enter those details there accordingly. Our default days delay is pulled through from our configuration there. If you've got a different delay agreed with your particular landlord, you can edit that at this point, and then you're going to save. And then you will just move through the rest of the process as normal. So you're referencing and marking your tenancy as let, etc. We'll skip forward now to when the tenant makes that payment to you for rent. So you just treat that as you would with any normal receipt. And we'll save that there. Looking on the statement tab for the tenant, everything looks as it would normally there. So we've received our payment for our rent charge and our deposit. What you will find that's different though is when we look at the landlord. So if we jump across to the landlord now and look at their statement tab, what we'll see is that that rent receipt hasn't transferred across to the landlord. So we've recorded that rent as coming in, the rent has been paid, but because this is a rent guarantee tenancy, that rent from the tenant is coming in from the tenant and will be payable to us as the agent. And we have a separate agreement with the landlord, that guaranteed rent that we've set up, that we will pay the landlord the agreed figure 5 days later. So the rent that comes in from the tenant won't appear to pay to the landlord. Where that will show instead is in your agency payment section. And within my agency payment section at the bottom here, you'll see my rent receipt that we've just recorded as being paid in as available funds in the client account to transfer out across to our main business account. If we fast forward 5 days now, so our 5 days cleared has passed, what we will find is if we go to our landlord record and look at our landlord statement, we will now see our guaranteed rent appearing as a receipt available to pay to our landlord. So there's the 1100 there that we set up. And that will appear automatically after the number of days have passed for you. So that will raise as available to pay to the landlord based on the amount that you've set up and the days delay you've set up there. What we'll also see if we go back to agency payments is that now within our agency payments section, we've got this guaranteed rent set here as a negative 1100. And that transaction there is working in the same way that a credit note would within the system. It's a negative, so it's going to allow you to move the money back from your business account into the client account to facilitate your payment to the landlord. So your guaranteed rent procedure is working as a separate agreement between you and the tenant and you and the landlord. Any money that comes in from the tenant is coming to you as the agent, and you are independently of that money coming in, paying your money across to the landlord. You can set those figures up to be different, so the rent that's due from the tenant can be one amount, and the amount that you're paying to the landlord can be another amount. And what that will basically allow you to do is always make that payment of whatever amount you agree to the landlord, regardless or not of whether that money has come in from the tenant. And both will work through your main business account, so money that comes in from the tenant will come into the client account and then be transferred out into the business account, and money that you're paying to the landlord will be processed from the business account into the client account, and you will pay it on to the landlord from there. And that will all happen through your agency payment section. The other scenario that you may have in terms of guaranteed rent is you may have an agreement with the landlord that they will get paid 12 months of the year, regardless of not or whether there is a tenant in situ. For that scenario, you may want to set up a guaranteed rent on the property rather than a particular tenancy that is guaranteed rent. There may be other scenarios where you'd want to set up guaranteed rent on the property rather than a guaranteed rent tenancy, but this would be the main one, and we'll have a look at doing that now. So we're going to go from the property, and each property will have a guaranteed rent tab. And what we can do is click Add Guaranteed Rent in the bottom left-hand corner. We can confirm the guaranteed rent amount, so the amount that we're going to be paying to our landlord. The frequency at which we're wanting to pay that. The day it first becomes due. And we can enter an end date in there if we need one. So if we were just agreeing that for a year, we could pop the end date of that agreement in. If it's indefinite, we can leave that blank and then we can save. And that guaranteed rent will appear there. There's no tenant in this guaranteed rent that we've set up because we haven't set it up from a tenancy. It doesn't depend on that tenant being in situ. It doesn't depend on that tenancy being active. It's purely set up on the property. So each month on the 6th, we will be agreeing to pay the landlord £1,200, regardless of not whether there's a tenant in there. So on the 6th of June, that charge will raise of its own accord automatically, and that money will show as available to be paid to the landlord in the same way that it did from the tenancy. And in the same way that it did from the tenancy, that guaranteed rent amount will show as a negative within our agency payment section. Final thing to have a little look at, if you ever need to make any changes or amendments to your guaranteed rents, if it's a guaranteed rent that you've got set up from a tenancy, your best place to do that from is the tenancy itself. On the Tenants tab, if you click the Edit button, the details will appear there. So if you need to change the amount due to the landlord or the day's delay there at all, you can edit that from that screen. If it's a property guaranteed rent that you're wanting to change, you will be best off changing it from that Edit button there. Again, you can change the amount due to the landlord or the frequency or pop in an end date there at all. Our guaranteed rents are happening automatically because we've got that set up within the configuration. However, if we need to force something through, so we want to manually charge something or pay something rather than wait for it to raise or charge automatically, we can do that. So if, for example, this guaranteed rent here that's due to charge automatically on the 6th of June, we want to raise that today, we can do that from the landlord record. Doing a right-click financial, and we can do pay guaranteed rent. Any guaranteed rents that are set up for that particular landlord will show here with the tenant if there's a tenant there and with the property that that relates to. We can tick alongside the one we're wanting to pay to them and click Save. And if we go to the statement of that landlord now, that guaranteed rent will show there as available to pay to the landlord. So that's the last bit to cover within the rent guarantee video. Thank you for taking the time to watch this video.